The sun bled low across the horizon, setting the prairie aflame in shades of gold and rust. And the cowboy named Jace Holloway rode with the kind of silence that comes from too many years alone. His hat pulled low, his rifle across the saddle, and his horse's hooves beating a steady song against the endless earth. He was a man carved out of dust and distance, his name carried in whispers from saloons to cattle camps, half in respect and half in warning, for Jace had a way of appearing when men were at their lowest and disappearing just as quick, leaving behind nothing but a trail in the dirt. On this evening, when the cicadas sang loud and the air was thick with the scent of dry sage, he heard something unusual, faint, ragged and human, the sound of a cough. Not strong and sharp, but weak, hollow, the kind of cough that rattled from the bones of someone already close to breaking. He reined in, listening, the prairie stretching in all directions like an ocean of grass. And then he saw her. She was stumbling along the wagon trail, a young woman in a faded blue dress torn at the hem, her bonnet dangling uselessly from her hand, her hair stuck to her fevered face with sweat. Each cough bent her double, her body racked as though the desert itself was trying to shake her apart. And still she pushed forward, step by faltering step, until her knees buckled and she collapsed into the dust. Jace dismounted in a fluid motion, his boots crunching against gravel as he approached, his shadow falling over her small, crumpled form. She lifted her head just enough for him to see her eyes, hollow, glassy, full of pain, and tried to speak. But all that came was another cough, dry and violent, flecked with red at the corner of her lips. He crouched beside her, tilting his hat back, his voice low and steady. "Easy now. You'll tear yourself apart like that." But she shook her head, whispering through cracked lips, "They'll come back. They'll finish it." Jace's eyes narrowed. He scanned the horizon, but saw no riders, no wagons, only the endless stretch of land. "Who?" he asked, but she was already slipping under, her strength gone, her body limp against the dust. He felt her pulse, thin, uneven, but alive, barely. Without another thought, he lifted her into his arms, her weight no more than a shadow, and carried her to his horse. The animal snorted uneasy, as though it sensed the fear clinging to her like smoke. But Jace swung her into the saddle, climbed up behind her, and with one arm holding her steady, nudged his horse into motion. The prairie swallowed them whole as the sun died, leaving only the whisper of her breathing and the dread that someone, somewhere, had meant for her not to see another sunrise. The cabin on the ridge was little more than 4 walls, and a roof patched with tin. But to Jace Holloway it was home enough, a place where the wind couldn't gnaw at a man's bones and where firelight still had a chance of pushing back the dark. He laid the young woman on the cot in the corner, her breath shallow, her cheeks flushed with fever. And for the first time in years, Jace found himself pacing, his calloused hands restless, his jaw set tight as he watched her fight for air. He had hauled men out of ambushes before, had patched bullet wounds with whiskey and rags, but sickness was another enemy altogether, one that crept inside and hollowed a body out from within, leaving a person nothing but whispers. He boiled water, mixed herbs he kept for trail fevers, and spooned the bitter tea to her lips. And though she coughed and sputtered, she drank, her lashes fluttering against her pale skin. Hours passed before her eyes opened again, clear for the first time, and in the dim firelight, she studied him with wary gratitude. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice weak but steady, and Jace shrugged, stirring the coals with an iron poker. "Didn't seem right to leave you for the buzzards." Her gaze lingered on him, as though searching his face for something more. But when another fit of coughing seized her, she doubled over, clutching the blanket. When it passed, her voice came out hoarse but edged with steel. "They'll come for me. You should have left me where I was." Jace leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. "Then maybe you ought to tell me who they are." For a long moment she said nothing, only stared into the fire as though the flames might burn her secrets away. And then the words spilled out, of men with hard eyes and harsher hands, men who had ridden into her father's ranch under the guise of trade, only to take what wasn't theirs, burning what they couldn't carry, leaving her bound and coughing in the dust, as though she was nothing but an afterthought to their cruelty. She spoke of a name too, Caldervoss, a man Jace knew by reputation alone, a cattle baron turned outlaw, whose reach stretched farther than lawmen cared to admit. And with that name, the air in the cabin seemed to change, growing heavier, darker. Jace sat forward, his hand brushing the rifle that leaned against the table. "Voss," he muttered, tasting the bitterness of the word. Then it ain't the cough that'll kill you. It's the company you kept. She shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and whispered, he won't stop. Not until I'm gone. And in the firelight, Jace Holloway made a silent vow that as long as she breathed under his roof, Calder Voss would have to ride through him first. The wind carried more than cold that night, it carried warning. Jace Holloway had lived long enough on the frontier to know when silence wasn't peace, but danger crouched low, waiting, and as he stepped out of the cabin with his rifle resting in the crook of his arm, he saw it plain as day in the patterns of the snow and the way the horses in the lean-to shifted nervously. Riders had been here, not hours but minutes before, circling wide, studying the place from the tree line before vanishing back into the dark. He cursed under his breath and went back inside, his boots heavy on the boards, and found her sitting up on the cot, her face pale but her eyes sharp, watching him as though she already knew. "They've found me, haven't they?" she whispered, and the tremor in her voice was not from sickness but from memory, the memory of the men who had left her coughing in the dust. Jace set the rifle down, poured himself a cup of black coffee gone cold, and said, "They're closer than I'd like, but they ain't got you yet." She coughed, bent forward, then straightened with a will that surprised him. "You don't understand. Calder Voss doesn't let go. If he sent his men, it means he wants me silenced for good. And if you stand in his way—" Her voice cracked, but Jace finished for her. "Then he'll learn what it means to push a man too far." He sat by the fire, the flames flickering across his weathered face, and told her what he hadn't told anyone in years, that Voss and he weren't strangers. Long ago they'd ridden together, driven cattle on the same trails, until greed had poisoned Voss's soul and Jace had walked away. Now the past had circled back, cruel as ever, placing this fragile young woman between them like the hinge on a door that could swing toward salvation or ruin. Outside, a coyote howled, the sound carrying over the plains like a broken trumpet, and Jace stood checking the chambers of his revolver with steady hands. "Get some rest," he told her. "Tomorrow won't be easy." She lay back, clutching the blanket, her cough rattling through the silence, and as the fire burned low, Jace took his chair by the door, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the window, waiting for the riders in the night to show themselves. Dawn broke with a sky the color of bruises, purple fading into gray, the kind of morning that made a man feel hunted before he'd even saddled his horse. Jace Holloway stood outside the cabin, cinching the girth tight, every movement sharp with urgency. He knew Calder Voss's men weren't far. The tracks he found in the snow the night before told him they'd circle back come daylight, and when they did, they wouldn't waste time talking. Inside, the young woman stirred weakly, trying to rise from the cot, her cough rattling in her chest, but her eyes still burned with the fire of survival. "You can't outrun him forever," she rasped, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Jace looked at her from the doorway, his hat pulled low, his jaw set like stone. "I don't aim to outrun him," he said quietly. "I aim to face him." She blinked, startled, as though she couldn't decide whether to be terrified or relieved. He didn't explain further. How could he? The history between him and Calder Voss wasn't just old, it was rotten, festering like a wound never cleaned. And he knew the moment was coming when it would burst open in blood and smoke. As the sun climbed, the silence broke with the faint thunder of hooves in the distance, a rhythm that grew louder with each passing second. She gripped the edge of the cot, whispering, "They're here." And Jace took up his rifle, the wood worn smooth by years of hard hands. He moved to the window, eyes narrowing at the sight of dark figures cresting the ridge, black against the pale morning. Voss's men had come, and with them rode the weight of Jace's past, heavy as an iron chain. He turned once more to her, and in that look he made a vow without words, that whatever happened when the first shot cracked,